what they do is a path to unhappiness. It is. It's a path to misery for millions and millions of people. I cut a video this week about Demi Lovato's new album, and this is not my area of expertise. I am not a Demi Lovato fanatic. I don't listen to this kind of music. As I said on the show, it's not that I'm a cultural snob. It's just I don't like. But the real problem is that if you actually listen to her album, it's actually quite sad. I actually feel terrible for this person. Like really feel terrible for this person. This is a person who alleges that she was raped at the age of 15 when she was on a set. Her parents were divorced when she was 2. She was put on TV at the age of 10. She was being dated when she was 17 by a man of 29. And she was in rehab by the time she was 17 years old. Okay, this is a person who has led an absolutely misery-ridden life. And her entire new album, which is titled, unsurprisingly, Holy F, right? And the cover is a picture of her in bondage gear on a cross-shaped couch, right? It's her just taking Madonna's routine. But the whole idea of the album, she sings about being victimized when she's 17. She has a whole song about her being 17, how terrible that felt. And she has these songs about how it's terrible that she's a drug addict and she's had to fight that. And all these things. But the entire album is geared at the evils of traditional morality, the one thing that she's never actually tried or been trained in or actually involved herself in, to the plaudits of the media. And so the point that I was making is that what the media do, they churn out misery. And then in order to alleviate your misery, they reward you for becoming a messenger of the misery. Right? You attack the system you've never actually tried as the thing that's held you back. And the thing that actually has held you back, if you champion it, we will reward you.
This is a form of porn that the New York Times op-ed page has now brought to absolute perfection. Whereas it's usually a woman, but sometimes a man, but it says, my life has been an absolute misery, and I defend to the death my right to have been this miserable. And we see it, our pal, Bridget Fetisi, who wrote a very touching piece about she was sorry for being a slut. But even in that piece, she says, I'm not saying we should go back to Victorian era or the 1950s. I would just tell my younger self, if you cherish yourself, then someone will cherish you. I thought, well, that's what a woman in the 1950s would have told her daughter too, so maybe they were just right.
This is the power of practice, though, and it's why I think we've got to be a little careful about this neutral language, because some things can't be neutral. If you call the great example is you call the girl she or you call the girl he, and that is not neutral. There's no neutral ground. You're making a moral claim there. And there's this idea, it's lex orandi, lex credendi, the way that we worship, the way that we, and really
you're French.
It's classic Arabic. So the way that we worship affects the way that we believe. And so these people who have been just trained in these rituals of leftism, liberalism, whatever you want to call it, they're trained in it. They know that it's making them miserable. The practices that have defined their lives have ruined their lives. They'll even admit it in a way in the paper, but they can't change the belief. That is the power, because we are bodies in many ways. And so the things that we do every single day, our behaviors every day, are going to affect the way that we believe. It's why we don't always succeed when we we rarely succeed actually, when we make totally rational arguments for why our way is better than their way. It doesn't matter, they got to do it.
We also don't realize the tribal nature of some of this stuff. My favorite op-ed writer right now is this woman in the Times named Michelle Goldberg, because Michelle Goldberg is constantly discovering that everything she believes is wrong, and then by the end of the column saying, "Oh, but it's all true," So she suddenly finds out that maybe the sexual revolution wasn't such a good thing. But I'm not saying but it was great. You shouldn't. The other day she wrote one of my favorite of her columns, which is "Art is now boring." That's absolutely true. We've hit an absolute low in the culture. In my lifetime, this is the lowest the culture has been because of woke, because their values aren't conducive to art, because they're not conducive to life. But she then starts quoting Karl Marx. This is all explained, and I thought, okay, I know the rest of this column.
My favorite recent piece in the New York Times, as long as we're doing favorite recent pieces in the New York Times, there's a woman who wrote this whole article about, I'm in a progressive marriage.
Yes.
It was an open marriage. And I was miserable.
Yes.
I was just miserable. It was the worst marriage ever. But that just demonstrates that progressive marriage is actually a wonderful, wonderful thing. And we need to get past the morality of the past.
Great.
And there's so much of this on the left. And that's why there's a study today that came out. And it's a study that every sentient human being knew was going to be true, which is that religious people have better sex.
Yeah,
right? There's a study that says religious people have better sex. Particularly women have a more meaningful sexual life when they are in a long-term relationship with a person who shares their values, which is the least shocking piece of news that has ever been broken upon the American people, ever. And it held true for men as well. Religious men tend to have better sex because it is in the context of a relationship that is actually fulfilling. And it turns out married people actually have a fair bit of sex because they actually know the person that they're having sex with. Because they do it fairly regularly, as it turns out. And
you don't have to go shopping for it.
Yeah, exactly. And so this entire study is written in the realm of almost like Jeff Corwin, like in Australia, and he's going around in the outback, like, why would... it's Steve Irwin, he's like, Crikey, what's... These people, they're like bunnies, I can't believe it. And you're like, well, I mean, this makes perfect sense. Why do you think, even if you're not a religious person, let's assume that you have a naturalistic explanation for religion. Okay, then why do you think these religious rituals began in the first place? And the answer is they're outgrowths of evolutionary biology, even if you're an atheist. Because human beings are naturally driven toward a life of meaning. Women are naturally driven toward mating with people who are very specific so they can propagate their line with not the schmo down the block. And men tend to be driven toward polygamy, but if they are forced by circumstance, and namely by women, into monogamy, they tend to lead healthier sex lives than people who are just out screwing whatever is available.
Yeah, but that's part of the trade-off.
Right. This is right. And so, the fact that we keep, there's so many, Christine Emba at the Washington Post, she keeps writing pieces about like, well, you know, it seems like the consent values that we've been promoting my entire lifetime, they're not sufficient. There's so many women who are consenting and then they regret, and is really consent enough? And it's like, where have you been? Where have you been? Can I recommend this thing? It rhymes with marriage. We've had it for literally forever. And it's just...
I don't want to tell a tale out of school, but my friends and I, some male friends and I, back in my wayward youth, we were discussing this one day, and we had this kind of epiphany. We said, you know, fellas, I just thought about this the other day. I think sex actually is better with people that you know. And like, furthermore, it's even better with people that you like. And we're sitting there like, wow. And I'm being somewhat, hyperbolic here, but those are the exact words we said. And we thought about that like an actual epiphany. And then we thought, maybe every person ever throughout history knew this except for us.
This is the battle.
This was the hinge of my life. This was the hinge of my life. I was walking down the street one day and I said, you know what? I'm not sleeping with women I don't like anymore. I'm not going to pretend to like women I don't like. Within 6 months, I met the woman who became my wife. Within 6 months, I was having the greatest dating experiences of my life because I just thought, I'm not going out with women I don't like. And then within 6 months, I met the woman.
It's not just that you like the person too. It's also you're having sex with someone and you can embrace the totality of the act and all of its consequences and see those things not as this thing that must be feared, but as a great blessing. So that's another part that allows us to enjoy it quite a bit more.
This is the thing about you mentioned the flesh and the spirit a little bit ago. You mentioned, certain people have genetic predispositions towards being overweight, and other people have eating disorders, and et cetera, et cetera. All of this is sort of one thing, which is that in the battle between flesh and spirit, you're being fed two ideas all the time. And the one idea is always a lie. And so it's like the fear of your spirit is a lie, and the promise of joy of the flesh is a lie. And so I've talked to, because we've never had an obese society before until right now. Yeah. Like you look at pictures from the beach in 1968, no one was overweight. And when I mean not overweight, people who we think of as not overweight now would have been considered overweight then.
They didn't have seed oils. That's why.
Yeah, that's right. It's not even that they were.
Side note, by the way, have you noticed that the sizes are changing? I'm talking about like clothing sizes.
Oh yeah.
They're changing. Like it's bizarre over the course of my lifetime. Okay, like I'm 5'9" and I weigh about 160, which puts me normally in the medium category. And now I'm having to wear smalls because the mediums are for giants.
Right, they're for giants.
I thought I was losing weight.
This is definitely happening. But the point I'm making is that I've had to have conversations with people about the fact that almost no one is overweight because of hormones and genetics. And they don't believe you. They're like, you're just wrong. I've had to have conversations with people who I have true affection for about the fact that most of the mental illness that we're dealing with is inflicted, not biological.
Yeah.
And my evidence of it is it's brand new. It's never existed before. All of this is because, on one hand,
in most places right now, by the way, comparatively,
even right now, most people aren't overweight in the world. Even right now, most people in the world don't have mental illnesses, among other things. If you believe the flesh, then you think. So I did hardcore keto, right, for a while, and I've never felt better. I've never been in better shape. It requires some discipline. It requires routines. That's a big part of how you accomplish it. We move to Nashville. All of my routines are broken. All of my discipline falls apart. All the places where I knew how to get the food that would still taste good, you've sort of solved it. All that goes away, and there are biscuits literally everywhere. Like
On the
under
great
this
sidewalk.
chair right now, there are biscuits. And I've gained 12 pounds. I feel worse. Every few days, I start trying to go back to the thing that I know made me feel better. And every few days, I'm tempted by the things that make me feel worse. And in the moment, the things that make me feel worse come with the promise of joy. The milkshake promises to make me feel better. The funny thing is, it makes me feel worse immediately. I don't just feel like guilt. I actually feel bad from the sugar, bad from the dairy. And nevertheless, that temptation is real. This is every single thing that we deal with in life.